Chapter 9 Ransom. Caroline was standing in the bathroom practicing expressions in the mirror. She had actually been studying her eyebrows to see what they did when she seemed sad to frightened. Thinking her sister was being strangled, Caroline rushed into the room. "What is it? Oh, Caroline, the most horrible thing right outside my window. Girls, what's going on? Dad, there was something right outside my window. What was it? A bobbing head, a floating face. It was green with gray eyes, and oh, it was awful, all decayed with drool coming out of its mouth. And Father reached down and picked up the book Beth had been reading, The Creeping Dead. Don't you think it's time to read something else for a change? I only had half a chapter to go, and I just had to know how it ended, but what I saw wasn't my imagination, it was real." Caroline and her mother went to the window. "Well, I don't see a thing. Eddie went next door to take back the eggs I borrowed. I'll bet it was her." "It wasn't Eddie." "I'll go check," said Father. Here came Eddie. "What's happening?" she asked. "You missed a floating face. Dad's going to check." "Don't bother. Guess who I just bumped into? Crashed into, actually. They were in such a hurry to get away." "Them?" Eddie nodded. "Who? Those Hatford boys?" "The very same. There's a ladder up against the house, right under Beth's window." "What now? Those guys must drive their mothers nuts." Coach Malloy was grinning. "That's the kind of thing you get when you have boys, Jean. Now don't you go telling on them. They helped wash our windows, didn't they?" Caroline waited as her parents went back downstairs, and then Eddie went into Beth's bedroom. "Those guys are terrible." "It could have been worse. Frankly, it had been a wonderful trip," Caroline decided, and she only wished that she had thought of it first. "We've got to get even. We've just got to, Eddie." Eddie smiled. "We already have. I've got their flashlight. A good flashlight, too. I bet it belongs to their dad. They won't get it back unless they give us something in return." "What?" "I haven't decided yet, but believe me, they'll have to crawl." It would make such a marvelous story, Caroline thought, sort of like Cinderella, only with the shoe on the other foot. This time they had the glass slipper, and whoever it belonged to had to come beg for it. On their way to school the next day, Beth and Eddie showed Caroline the ransom note they had written to the Hatfords. "To whom it may concern. If you ever hope to see your flashlight again, you will meet us at the swinging bridge at 7:30 this evening, and you will each say aloud, 'I am honestly and truly sorry for the trouble I have caused, and will be a faithful, obedient servant of the realm now and forever. The Malloy Musketeers.'" "Servant of the realm?" Caroline asked. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," said Beth, "but I read it in a book and it sounded wonderful." "It is wonderful. We could go walking down the path tonight, single file, dressed like Egyptian princesses or something, and make them kneel down on their knee." "Not me," said Eddie. "I'm not going as any princess." "The boys would never do that. Getting them to say they're sorry is going to be hard enough." "Who gets the note?" "You're going to give it to Wally. If we give it to Jake and Josh, they won't even read it probably. Just make a spitball out of it." Caroline could hardly wait to get to class. Whenever the bell rang and she went to her room, however, Wally wouldn't even look at her, which told her just how upset the boys were that they had lost their father's flashlight. She decided to wait until Miss Applebaum finished talking before she dropped the note over Wally's shoulder, but Miss Applebaum wouldn't hush. She was talking about the invention of the telegraph or something. Caroline rested her head on one hand and drew a picture of Miss Applebaum in her notebook. The more the teacher droned on, the wilder the drawing became. The dragon lady looked like Miss Applebaum, had the same kind of hair. Wally raised one hand to go to the bathroom, and Miss Applebaum nodded that he could go. Now, thought Caroline, while he was out of the room, she waited until Miss Applebaum was looking the other way. Then quickly she leaned forward and dropped the note on Wally's desk. When Wally came back, Miss Applebaum was still carrying on, and Caroline was busily drawing claws on the teacher's hands and feet. She saw Wally's head bend down over the desk as though he were looking at something, saw his arms move slightly as though he were unfolding a piece of paper, and then she watched as his ears turned from pink to red. A few minutes later, a small piece of paper came flying over Wally's shoulder and landed on her notebook. "Malloy Musketeers," it said. "Drop dead." The telegraph led to the telephone and the phonograph, and Caroline felt she could not stand it another minute. This time she raised her hand to go to the restroom. Once in the hallway, she gave a big sigh of relief. The girls' restroom was on the other side of the auditorium, and Caroline did a risky thing. Instead of going around, she opened one of the great doors in the darkened room, took the 4 steps up on stage, and walked out in the middle. Goosebumps rose. Someday she was sure she would be here on this stage with lights on her. She walked to the very edge of the stage and whispered to the audience, a faithful and obedient servant of the realm, now and forever. It sounded wonderfully mysterious and romantic. That dawn, she crossed over, went down the steps, and out the door on the other side. All heads were bent over desks when Caroline came back in the room. "We are all writing a paragraph about what we think is the world's greatest invention, Caroline." Thank goodness the lecture was over. When she looked down at her notebook, however, she realized that the picture of Miss Applebaum was missing. There were little bits of paper around the 3 metal rings, as though the paper had been quickly snatched out. Her heart leaped. She stared up at the teacher, wondering if Miss Applebaum had come in by and taken it. But the teacher seemed completely undisturbed. Caroline stared at the back of Wally's head. He had taken it. He must have. When he came back from the restroom and walked by her desk, he must have seen what she was drawing, and somehow, when she was out of the room herself, he had managed to turn around and take her drawing. When the papers were collected 15 minutes later, Caroline was not even sure what she had written, and on the way out the door to recess, she poked Wally in the back. "You give me my paper or else." Wally just smiled. "Meet me at the swinging bridge at 7:30 this evening and crawl down the path on your hands and knees," he said. Caroline was beside herself. This is blackmail. Beth and Eddie would never forgive her for doing something so dumb. It was a horrible day, and as soon as school was out, Caroline charged out the door like a hornet and told Eddie and Beth what had happened. The Hatford boys had already headed for home and were looking at the girls over their shoulders, laughing and hooting as they went. When Caroline and her sisters reached the swinging bridge, Caroline was too angry to go home, too angry to speak. She stood glaring after the Hatford boys as they went up on the porch of their house and slammed the door, and then she saw something else. Clothes drying on the clothesline in the back of their house. "Wait here," she told Beth and Eddie. She marched right up on the Hatford's lawn. Without looking to the right or left, she stalked around to the back, grabbed a pair of jockey shorts off the clothesline, then ran for her life as the boys came out on the porch and stared. Waving the shorts high in the air, she tore across the swing bridge, Beth and Eddie behind her, and didn't stop until they were safely in their house and up in Caroline's room. "Wonderful," said Eddie. "I'll show them all around school. I'll tell everyone in my class they're Wally's. I'll ask him how his pants are. He and his brothers don't get back their flashlight or their shorts until they return my drawing of Miss Applebaum and get down on one knee and apologize." The phone rang. "I'll bet they want to exchange things right now. They can't even wait until the evening." Caroline picked up the phone. "Malloy Musketeers," Caroline speaking. There was a short pause on the other end, and then a man's voice said, "Caroline, this is Mr. Hatford from across the river. I wonder if you would mind returning my shorts."